When first getting involved in the project, I suppose I was quite interested in the idea of commoning as an act and, the idea of sharing common resources. So I began to think about my local area and surrounding streets and what was going on in that area, ways that people were commoning, and also began to think, closer to home of my own flat. I live in a tenement in Glasgow, and tenement living is a form of commons. We share gardens, we share, I suppose, we share our hallways, and there's acts of commoning that go on within a tenement, such as sharing chores or sharing. Well, during COVID, we've been doing a lot of sharing food and helping each other in different ways. I also began to think of my own flat and thinking about things that maybe I do there that would be considered as acts of commoning. I used to do Airbnb, and maybe it's not so much commoning now, but I think when it first started, it was definitely an act of commoning. Bartering, I do a lot of bartering with friends and neighbours. Also do a project called Tin Can Tuesdays, where we share food with the local food bank. We cook and gather food for the food bank. So within my area, there are quite a lot of projects. There's a music lending library, there's a tool library, a swap market, repair cafe, which I'm involved in. There's also public spaces, Queen's Park Arena, that's a shared space within the park. I also began to think about COVID commons and what was happening during the pandemic, and how acts of commoning were happening within the area, things that people were doing together or new things that were started. So began to think of maybe a way I could represent these. So thinking about mapping and thinking about, everything from my flat out to the surrounding streets around. And then I had an idea maybe to do a sort of like a guild of commoning, where I actually create badges or some sort of celebration of these projects, or some sort of group that would bring the projects together. So I've been thinking about the idea of badges, and I suppose a little bit like brownie badges or scout badges, or the old guild badges, and looking also at techniques such as gold work, which is a technique where threads are laid down and then they're stitched on top. So I'm looking at stitches and different things that I could do to represent these badges. So I've been looking at a map of the local area and thinking about where things are within that space. So this is within 2 kilometres of my apartment. And first of all looked at green spaces and realised I'm very lucky to have so many green spaces around, but then realised it was not only these green spaces, but between each block of tenement flats in Glasgow there are lanes which have become common spaces. People have started to use them for outdoor spaces, and particularly during COVID as well. And then thinking about where the projects are placed within this. So this is just the beginnings of starting to plot where these projects are. So I've started thinking about embroidering a map or embroidering a map, and I've been using threads which I've dyed from plants in the park, and there's everything from apple to ivy to bramble, and I managed to get some fantastic colours, and this connects very well with the idea of commoning. And I suppose one of the other things I've been looking at is foraging, and how people are using common spaces to gather food. So these colours will form the badges, and I've begun to embroider this map using some of the threads that have been used or have been naturally dyed, and using this technique, goldwork technique, where threads are laid down and then stitched over the top. It's starting to look a little bit like a globe, I suppose, in a way. So it's my little area, my area of 2 kilometres around my house. So from this in the exhibition, I hope to display the map plus the badges which relate to each project within the space.